Welcome to Congress in Context. We're the show that, well, tries to cut through all the noise and get you really informed about what's happening on Capitol Hill.
That's the goal.
And today, we are doing a deep dive into a really packed week. We're going to focus mostly on Tuesday, July 29th, 2025, looking at both the House and the Senate.
Right. And our mission here is basically to unpack the big legislative moments, look at the politics behind them, and, figure out what these actions actually mean for you, the listener.
Exactly. And we're not just guessing here.
No, definitely not. We've gone straight to the source, the Congressional Record. We're talking legislative proposals, committee reports, floor debates, votes, all from this past week.
We're sorting through the official stuff to bring you what really matters.
The essential nuggets, yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the legislative landscape. Tuesday started, as usual, with prayers, the Pledge of Allegiance in both chambers.
Standard procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And the Senate approved the previous day's journal, wrapped up morning business. Pretty routine start.
But beyond those formalities, where did things really start moving this week? What about the committees?
Oh, the committees were buzzing. Absolutely. Take the Senate Armed Services Committee. They reported out favorably a huge list, 512 military nominations.
Wow, 512.
Yeah, across Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force. That's not just paper pushing. It signals some pretty significant leadership shifts happening in the military.
That is a massive number for one day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what else? Banking Committee.
Yep. Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. They moved forward an original bill called the Road to Housing Act of 2025. Got a favorable report.
Road to Housing.
Yeah.
And AI. I saw something about AI.
Right. A subcommittee there held a hearing specifically on how AI is playing a role in capital markets and insurance. That's obviously a growing area of interest.
Makes sense. And foreign relations.
They were busy too. Hearings, business meetings, focusing on ambassadorial nominations. Part of the ongoing process for the Trump administration, filling those diplomatic posts.
Okay. And commerce, science, and transportation. Sounds like they had a mix.
They did, a whole package of bills. One that stood out was S-1691, looking at limiting facial recognition tech in airports.
Oh, interesting. Controversial topic.
For sure. And then S-389, the Lithium-Ion Battery Safety Standards Act, the CBO actually put out a score for that one.
CBO, Congressional Budget Office, right. They do the cost estimates.
Exactly. They figured about $8 million over 5-6 years. It does impose a private sector mandate, but, and this is key, they projected it wouldn't hit that $206 million threshold that usually triggers more scrutiny.
Gotcha. So a cost, but maybe not a budget-busting one, according to the CBO. What else was in that package?
Also, S-414, the ADS for Mental Health Services Act. This one requires digital ad platforms to report on mental health ads. Estimated cost? Pretty small, less than $500,000.
So a range of things, from tech privacy to battery safety to mental health advertising, shows the breadth of what these committees handle.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move from committees to the floor. What about actual votes? What were the big bills that passed, or maybe the ones that sparked debate?
Well, two significant law enforcement-related bills passed together, en bloc, they call it. That was S-911, the Chief Herbert D. Proffitt Act, and S-1595, the Improving Police Critical Aid for Responding to Emergencies Act.
Passed together.
Yeah.
How did the vote break down?
It was fairly close, actually. 51 yeas to 47 nays. So mostly along party lines, but maybe a couple crossovers.
And S-911, the Proffitt Act, what's the core of that one?
It's really impactful. It expands the public safety officers' benefits program. The key thing is it now includes retired officers who die or become permanently disabled from a targeted attack because of their past service.
Because of their service, even after retiring.
Exactly. And what's really striking is the retroactivity. It goes back to January 1st, 2012.
Wow, over a decade back.
Yeah, so it addresses this gap that's existed for a while. It means officers or their families affected years ago might now be eligible for benefits. That's a fundamental change.
And S-1595, the other one in that package.
That one's more about equipment. It sets standards for the trauma kits first responders by using federal grants, basically ensuring they have the essential life-saving gear.
Okay, so support for officers and better equipment. What else passed? Anything less contentious?
Well, S-1020 did. The hydropower project construction extension, that passed by unanimous consent. No objections.
Unanimous consent. So everyone agreed. What does it do?
It gives FERC, that's a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, more flexibility. They can extend construction licenses for hydropower projects, especially if they got hit by supply chain problems since 2020.
Supply chains.
Yeah.
Still dealing with that fallout.
Right. So instead of the standard 8 years, they can get up to another 6 years. It's about keeping those projects viable, adapting to, real-world delays.
Makes sense. A bit of practical flexibility for infrastructure, especially with energy independence goals in mind.
Exactly. It shows Congress trying to be responsive to those external pressures on long-term projects.
Okay, so that's stuff that passed. What about new proposals? Any major bills introduced this week that we should keep an eye on?
Definitely. A big one came from Senator Durbin and a whole group over 40 Democratic co-sponsors. S-20523, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act of 2025.
The John Lewis Act. Okay, that sounds significant. What's the aim?
It's a really comprehensive attempt to update the Voting Rights Act. It wants to revise the criteria for which states need federal preclearance for voting changes. That's Section 4.
Revising the criteria?
Yeah.
Based on what?
It lays out new standards for judging vote dilution, and it specifically points back to the Thornburg v. Jingles Supreme Court case as the standard. It also tackles vote denial, clarifying that things creating a discriminatory burden, even if rooted in social or historical conditions, count as violations.
So trying to strengthen protections against discrimination.
Right. And it would also give the Attorney General more power to investigate and enforce voting rights, including demanding documents and requiring public notice for voting procedure changes. It could really change the landscape for voting laws.
A potentially huge bill. What about the House side? Any notable introductions there?
Yes, H.R. 4798, introduced by Representative Green of Georgia, Mr. Davidson, and Mr. Collins. This one's also about representation, but from a very different angle.
How so?
It proposes counting only citizens in the decennial census when deciding how many representatives each state gets.
Only citizens for apportionment. That would be a massive change.
Monumental. Right now, the census counts everyone residing in the state. If you only count citizens, states with large non-citizen populations could lose seats in Congress while others might gain. It would redraw the political map, essentially.
Definitely one to watch. Any other introductions catch your eye?
There were companion bills in both the House and Senate, H.R. 4797 and S-2512, aiming to make it easier for college students to qualify for SNIP, the Food Assistance Program, removing some current restrictions.
Okay. And defense-related. You mentioned the NDAA earlier.
Yeah, proposed amendments floating around for the National Defense Authorization Act. One would ban federal agencies from buying or using unmanned ground vehicle systems, UGVs, made by companies from places like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea.
The covered foreign entities.
Right. There are exceptions for national interest, like research, but it reflects that bigger push to secure supply chains, especially for military tech, away from geopolitical rivals.
And another one related to property.
Yes. Another proposed NDAA amendment would block foreign persons from buying or leasing land, public or private, within 100 miles of a military installation.
100 miles. That's a pretty wide radius.
It is. Shows pretty heightened concern about security around military bases and critical infrastructure.
Okay, let's switch gears to nominations. We mentioned the armed services list, but what about individual confirmations, especially judicial ones?
Yeah.
Emil Bove III to the Third Circuit. That one got attention.
It certainly did. Confirmed 51 to 47, so again, a close vote. But the debate around him was intense.
What were the main points of contention?
The minority leader, Mr. Schumer, made some really strong accusations. He alleged Bove personally ordered the firing of dozens of federal prosecutors who had worked on January 6th cases.
Firing J6 prosecutors.
That was the allegation, yeah. And Schumer quoted Bove as calling those prosecutions a grave national injustice. There were also claims, supposedly backed by a whistleblower, that Bove told his team to mislead judges and even try to corrupt bargain with the mayor of New York City about immigration policies.
Wow, those are serious allegations for a judicial nominee.
Extremely serious. It really fueled a debate about, the politicization of the Justice Department and what standards should apply for judges.
Quite a contrast then to William Kimmett's confirmation.
Absolutely. Kimmett, nominated for Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade, sailed through by unanimous consent.
Everyone agreed?
Yep. He's a former advisor to the U.S. Trade Representative, seen as very qualified. His job is crucial for market access, enforcing trade laws. The fact that he got full bipartisan support says a lot.
It does. It shows agreement is still possible on key economic roles. And Sam Brown.
Sam Brown confirmed 53 to 45 for the National Cemetery Administration. He's a combat veteran, severely injured in service. His confirmation highlights that focus on putting people with direct veteran experience into leadership roles in veteran affairs.
Okay. And there are still others waiting for votes.
Right.
Cloture motions filed.
That's right. Cloture is that step to end debate and move to a final vote. Motions were filed for Thomas Geiser, Assistant Attorney General, Joseph Kent, Director of National Counterterrorism Center, Cheryl Mason, VA Inspector General, Casey Mulligan, SBA Chief Counsel for Advocacy, and Nicholas Kent, Under Secretary of Education.
So the process of staffing the executive branch continues.
It does. It's ongoing.
All right, let's pivot now to the broader political dynamics. We heard about specific bills and votes, but what about the messaging? The narratives being pushed. The majority leader, Mr. Thune, was talking up the one big, beautiful bill.
Yes, he really championed that, presented it as this comprehensive package, now law, that fulfills the Republican promise to get America back on track.
And what specific benefits did he highlight?
A lot for farmers and ranchers. Reauthorizing commodity programs out to 2031, raising reference prices, a voluntary base acre update, boosting crop insurance, especially extending support for new farmers to 10 years, plus improvements for livestock and dairy programs.
So heavy focus on agriculture.
Definitely. But also mentioned conservation investments, research, trade, and broad individual and small business tax relief, trying to paint a picture of wide-ranging benefits.
And Senator Barrasso, another Republican, echoed that theme.
He did, very strongly. Called it a turnaround like the Reagan era. And he went directly after the Democrats.
How so?
He claimed Republicans stopped a $4 trillion tax increase that he said every Democrat voted for. He emphasized tax cuts for working folks on tips, overtime, Social Security deductions for seniors.
So contrasting tax policies, what else?
Energy. He credited the bill with reversing Biden's policies, boosting domestic production onshore, offshore, Alaska lowering prices, restoring energy dominance. Also mentioned strengthening Medicaid with work requirements while assuring that vulnerable groups keep coverage.
And security.
Big focus there, too. A $150 billion military investment. And border security, $46.5 billion to finish the wall, ending catch and release. He claimed illegal crossings were at record lows and zero releases recently. He wrapped up with some pretty strong language characterizing Democrats as radical and out of touch.
Okay, a very positive framing from the Republican side. What about the counter-narrative from the minority leader, Democrat Chuck Schumer?
A completely different picture, as you'd expect. He framed the Trump administration as one of costs, chaos, and corruption. He cited a Gallup poll showing a 37% approval rating for Trump, suggesting deep buyer's remorse among Americans, called Trump's promises duds and lies.
Cost, chaos, corruption. How do you break that down?
For chaos, he pointed to trade wars, inconsistent tariffs. He also heavily criticized the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, accusing it of hollowing out the Social Security Administration by firing 7,000 staff.
Firing Social Security staff. What was the alleged impact?
Longer phone wait times, online services going dark, leaving seniors anxious and betrayed, in his words.
And corruption.
He accused President Trump of, quote, unprecedented self-enrichment. He cited specific examples, like a deal with Qatar for the presidential library, turning the White House lawn into a Tesla dealership, and family members profiting from crypto schemes.
Strong accusations there. What about the Jeffrey Epstein files? That came up too.
Yes, Schumer brought that up forcefully. He criticized President Trump for not releasing the files as promised during the campaign. He pointed fingers at Speaker Johnson, too, for scheduling an Epstein recess in the House, which Schumer claimed was to avoid a vote on releasing the files.
An Epstein recess.
That's the term Schumer used. And he didn't stop there. He formally requested an FBI counterintelligence assessment.
On the Epstein files. Why counterintelligence?
His concern was about potential foreign access to those files, especially given recent hacks of government agencies blamed on China. He framed it as a national security risk if adversaries got hold of potentially compromising information on influential people.
So connecting the Epstein files controversy directly to national security concerns.
Exactly. He challenged Trump directly. Stop running away from this issue and release the files if there's truly no national security risk. It raises serious questions about what's in those files and why they remain unreleased.
Amidst all this political fighting, were there moments that transcended the partisanship, tributes or community-focused moments?
Yes, there were. It's important to remember that side of Congress, too. Senator Schumer himself gave a very moving tribute to victims of a recent shooting in Midtown Manhattan, Officer Islam and Wesley LePetner, among others.
Acknowledging that local tragedy.
Right. And Senator Cassidy spoke about the upcoming 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. He recalled the devastation, the cost, the lives lost, the displacement, but also celebrated Louisiana's resilience and the national response, like the $15 billion spent on levees. He made the point that building resiliency works.
So moments of remembrance and acknowledging shared experiences, even difficult ones.
Absolutely. And there were many other tributes to local heroes, institutions, anniversaries across different states. It shows that connection members maintain to their home communities.
Okay, let's circle back to policy divides. We touched on the law enforcement bills S-911 and S-1595 earlier. Senator Cortez Masto, a Democrat, supported those.
She did. She advocated strongly for them, highlighting the dangers officers face, pointing to recent assaults on ICE officers and shootings, framing it as essential support for law enforcement and their families.
But then Senator Booker, also a Democrat, had objections, not to those specific bills, but
Right, that was the nuance. He explicitly said he supported S-911 and S-1595 because they help all officers. His objection was to moving other law enforcement bills forward en bloc at the same time.
why object to the others?
He argued those other bills were structured in a way that would exclude states like his own, New Jersey, plus California, and New York from getting federal grants. He blamed this on the actions of this president, accusing him of politicizing funding and unconstitutionally denying money to states he doesn't like.
So alleging political targeting through grant allocation.
Exactly. He was quite fiery, saying, "I demand justice," and calling on his Democratic colleagues to have a backbone and fight what he saw as authoritarian moves. It really exposed a raw nerve about how federal resources are distributed and whether it's being done fairly or politically.
That's a significant divide, not just on policy, but on the very process and use of federal power.
Definitely.
So pulling back for some analysis, the whole situation around the Emil Bove nomination and the Epstein recess seems to point to some serious underlying tensions about the DOJ.
It really does. Schumer's detailed accusations, the alleged firings, the supposed corrupt bargain, they paint a picture, at least from his perspective, of significant political interference within the Justice Department.
And the timing of that administrative stay on the contempt proceedings against Bove right before his confirmation.
Yeah, allegedly for 3 months, just long enough to get him confirmed. It raises unavoidable questions about judicial integrity, the separation of powers, and whether the confirmation process itself was manipulated. It turned what's usually a more, well, sedate process into a real political brawl.
Yet, contrast that with the unanimous consent votes, S-911-1595 getting through, S-1020. It shows Congress can still work together.
It absolutely does. It's easy to focus only on the fights. But these moments show that on practical matters, supporting first responders, dealing with infrastructure delays, broad agreement is still possible. They can act quickly and collaboratively.
But it's not always straightforward, even with unanimous consent attempts.
No. Like Senator Lee trying to pass other public lands bills that way and getting blocked by Senator Murray, it shows non-controversial is subjective. Murray wanted her own Wild Olympics bill included in a bigger package. So even unanimous consent can get tangled up in broader legislative strategies.
Okay, let's look at some other emerging themes.
Yeah.
National security seems to be evolving beyond just military hardware. That SPR amendment, for instance.
Right. The proposed ban on selling oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. It's a clear strategic move. Don't let potential adversaries benefit from our emergency reserves, tying energy policy directly to geopolitics.
And the immigration enforcement debate seems as intense as ever.
Yeah, you have that Senate resolution S-Res S-341 explicitly stating ICE can't arrest or deport U.S. citizens and calling for better safeguards. That's focused on protecting citizens' rights.
Which clashes directly with the majority leader's narrative celebrating zero catch and release and low border crossings.
Exactly. It highlights this fundamental tension. How do you enforce immigration law effectively while rigorously protecting civil liberties and ensuring agency oversight? They're coming at it from completely different priorities.
And then there's the UAP bill proposal, an Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Records Review Board.
Fascinating, isn't it? The goal is an independent, enforceable process to get government UAP records declassified and released to the public.
With a presumption of immediate disclosure.
Yes, and protections for whistleblowers. It implies there's a significant body of information the government holds, and there's now serious pressure formalized in this proposal to make it public. The big question is, what's actually in those files?
So, looking ahead, what are the big takeaways? The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, S-2523. What's its path forward?
It faces a very tough climb. Given the largely partisan sponsorship and the heated atmosphere we saw around the Bove confirmation, getting bipartisan support will be incredibly difficult. But its potential impact is enormous, so it's definitely one to watch closely.
And that deadline for flood insurance is looming.
September 30th. The National Flood Insurance Program expires then. If Congress doesn't reauthorize or reform it, millions could lose coverage. That creates huge uncertainty for homeowners and potentially massive costs for taxpayers down the line if there are major floods.
Can they reach a deal before the deadline? Always the question.
Always the question. History suggests maybe another short-term patch, but the pressure for long-term reform is building.
And the above confirmation fallout.
I think we'll see continued scrutiny of judicial appointments and ongoing calls for DOJ transparency and accountability, especially around any whiff of political interference. That controversy isn't just going away.
The focus on new national security threats also seems likely to continue.
Right. Things like the UGVS restrictions, the foreign land purchase proposal. It shows Congress grappling with threats in tech, economics, and infrastructure, not just traditional military ones.
And the Gaza situation.
Right. That's clearly not fading. Schumer's speech about the humanitarian crisis and U.S. arms supplies. It's a deeply emotional, politically charged issue that will keep influencing foreign policy debates, potentially impacting arms sales and diplomatic relations.
So, a lot for listeners to track. How can people engage with all this?
Well, your role as the listener is key. Understanding this stuff empowers you to actually participate. All these bills we talked about, S-2523, H.R. 4798, S-911, you can find the full text and track their status on congress.gov.
Knowing the bill number is like a shortcut.
Exactly. And don't forget, your senators, your representative, they work for you. Their contact info is easy to find on their websites. Knowing these details lets you talk to them or their staff in a really informed way.
Go beyond just the headlines.
Right. You can even look up those CBO reports for cost estimates. See upcoming committee hearings like that Senate Agriculture one on the USDA reorganization. These things directly affect people's lives.
We've covered a lot today. Voting rights, national security, judicial ethics, energy, aid for first responders. These aren't just abstract D.C. battles.
No, they shape the country, they shape your community, they shape your life.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, think about what stood out most to you from this week in Congress. What issues resonated? And maybe consider, how can you use this knowledge to stay engaged in the conversation?